There's about 50, maybe 100 people on a vessel. And those individuals, they have timesheets they need to do. There's incident reports, but they have the worst internet on the planet. That's where our software comes in and solves the problem. I've containerized multiple applications and made a full automated software deployment package for call centers before. It's just, you got to think around the box. The things you can't change, don't try changing them. The things you can change, what would be the expected outcome versus the actual outcome?
Dr. Glenn Vickers is a technology and cybersecurity executive who turns legacy complexity into secure, high-performance systems, leading global teams, governing risk, and delivering measurable business impact at scale.
Data loss prevention and your data classification. If you do not have that, you are garbage in, garbage out 100%. Your AI will have a conniption fit and start doing things it probably shouldn't.
You care as much about people and culture as platforms and controls. So that sounds good on paper, but what does that actually look like when you're under pressure to deliver the team and the team is stretched out?
It's a matter of my core principles. I refuse to lie if I can help it.
Welcome to another episode of Automate or Die Trying. I'm Will, and today I'm joined with Dr. Glenn Vickers. He's the head of IT and CISO at ABS Wavesight, where he's been rebuilding the technology organization from the ground up while running cybersecurity for a mission-critical maritime technology environment. Glenn's career spans Chevron, PepsiCo, and now ABS Wavesight. And the thorough line is clear: taking fragmented legacy systems and turning them into something that actually works. We're talking 95% uptime, 75% vulnerability reduction, and DevOps pipelines that are 85% faster, and a $2 million in OPEX savings. Glenn, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
So for folks listening, can you give us a quick snapshot of what you're responsible for today and what scale you're operating at?
So in my little slice of the world, I'm responsible for the IT infrastructure and a little bit of the architecture of our platforms and services. ABS Wavesight is a SaaS-based company. We're software development. Our parent company, ABS, is a little bit more well-known. They're the people that do what's called classification of a vessel. And what that means is they go on a vessel, you take a tanker, cruise liner, you name it, one of the bigger vessels that are just massive, and they do an audit, like a car safety inspection almost. I'm simplifying it, of course, but something similar to that. And they go bow to stern, so back to front, side to side, and check every single aspect of that vessel to make sure it's seaworthy. And if it passes inspection, then you're allowed to continue on your merry way. Our software is an ERP software for the maritime industry. So what our software does is we deploy on a vessel so that the vessel people, like if you think about it, there's about 50, maybe 100 people on a vessel. And those individuals, they have timesheets they need to do. There's incident reports, there's HSQE, there's everything you can think of that like SAP would do in a sense is done on the vessel, but they have the worst internet on the planet. So that's where our software comes in and solves the problem.
Nice. So Glenn, you've held C-suite roles, right? The CISO, CTO, and CISO level roles across, Fortune 50s and mid-market companies. So how did you get into that space? Was it always technology leadership, or did you come at it at a different angle, from a different
No, I started ground up, actually. So I've been at this, next year will be about 30 years. Just to date myself a little bit, started in the 90s. I started in the help desk. I was ground support for Packard Bell tech support.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Way back then in the 90s. And I've progressively gone up. So Y2K, for example, I was working in a grocery store chain called Albertsons. And we were doing AS400 to NT40 conversions. That was my job at the time. Moving everything up to the AS400, which was not Y2K compliant, for those that know what that is. And moving it to NT40, which was. So I've been at this for a very, very, very long time. I think in the last 15 years is when cybersecurity started to become really a heavy thing. And I was already doing core infrastructure, Active Directory, identity management, because Active Directory and groups was where it kind of started. So I've been doing that part for a very long time, and that kind of ballooned into what I'm doing now. So cybersecurity has always been something that's kind of where I've been. It used to be the vulnerability management was named now, but beforehand it was make sure you patch your machines and make sure it doesn't break anything. So you test those patches. Like it's always been a part of IT for as long as I can remember. So that's
Yeah, Y2K years, remember, where MCSC and COBOL programmers were gods back then, right?
oh, absolutely. Yes, it was fun.
So you've got a doctorate in organizational leadership, right? That's not a typical path for someone running IT and security. So how has that shaped the way you approach rebuilding systems or rebuilding teams and systems?
So my doctorates was kind of a different approach. So my master's and my bachelor's are both IT straight up, Master of Information System, the bachelor's of networking, and my PhD. I wanted to go left field. I everyone said if you're going to get in a leadership, do an MBA. Well, I tried the MBA track and found some less than desirable behaviors, especially with team projects, and I'll just kind of leave that there. So I was like, all right, no. So the next thing that happened is no one in my family has ever gone past an associate's. So I made the decision with my wife, my mom, my sister, my brother. I asked all of them and pretty much made the decision that, you know what, I'm going to go all the way to the end and let's just go. It's
That,
pretty much a whim decision. And I was always interested in leadership anyways, because I was kind of in the leadership kind of space, being either solo IT, leaders of teams or projects or whatever you. So I was like, all right, and I'm just going to go get a full doctorate in organizational leadership. A little bit different and a whole lot of fun. So it's like MBA on steroids. It's a little bit crazy. Published as well. My dissertation was also cited, which never happens. So apparently, talking about virtual leadership before COVID was the thing was the right thing to do, I guess. So it ended up turning out quite well for me.
well, go figure. So, was there an early project or failure that fundamentally changed how you think about stabilization or governance?
I've had quite a few failures that I can lean from. Most of them directed around core migration services. There's been a few that I can think of that have failed miserably, and I have a couple successes in there where they happened brilliantly and nothing went wrong, which is unusual. Those are few and far between. Even if you plan for every contingency, there's always something that happens, data set weirdness or what have you. But the failures are usually just project hiccups. They slow things down. They're not too bad. They tend to lead toward a better design, though. So, for example, one of the ones that I deployed at an oil and gas company in my past, we needed a infrastructure for identity management that was global. And to make sure that was global, we had to change architecture quite significantly and deploy in 3 different locations across Azure. And at the time, Azure was pretty much VMware hosted by Microsoft. I don't know how else it's Hyper-V, I guess, not VMware. But essentially, it was kind of the same thing. They started introducing services like application gateways and things like that, which are really neat. But by and large, that hosting took longer than it should have because of additional complications with deployment, some patching that needed to happen, but it wasn't in the project, so it wasn't budgeted. A lot of bureaucratic, interesting things happened as well that slowed the project down. But by and large, it still got deployed and still became the central utility for identity at the company. So it's not necessarily that the thing fell flat and just was given up. It's just it took longer than it should have.
Yeah. So when you joined ABS Wavesight, you were brought in to rebuild the technology organization, right? Governance, stabilization, enterprise-wide standards. Where do you even start when you walk into that kind of situation?
Where you need to start is with you need a 90-day plan before you start into something like this. And what you need to start with in the first is you need an assessment. be it a risk assessment, be it systems assessment, and find out where the pain points are for the organization. And those could be anything from customer complaints to alerts that are being fired off all the time and no one's paying attention to them, to um, a, a bunch of different risks like vulnerabilities not happening and patching properly. There's so many things that could be in that assessment that you need to do first. So within the first 30 days, you should be doing a couple of assessments, risk assessment, obviously, and a couple others, just to determine what needs to be done. And now you need to scope. So you need to determine priority. What's the most important thing? And if you're a for-profit revenue company, the most important thing is making sure your customers don't hate you enough they want to leave, right? And if you're hosting them and it's a hot mess, so you need to make a battle plan to alleviate those pain points where you can, where it's now down to the software to improve, and the software isn't trying to troubleshoot and fix things that actually is not their problem, right? So you alleviate that, you change some of the fundamental architecture if you have to. Watch, if you understand coding, you should understand that, for example, C#, the way it behaves on a machine is different than the way Java would work on a machine, right? They have different fundamental architectures as platforms for applications. So what you see as a behavior on a machine will be different. And then determining the core of an application plus the system it's being hosted on will help you determine kind of what you need to do to make that application run more efficiently on the host. Because maybe, just maybe, the min spec from the application side was not accurate, or somebody took it to heart and literally built what the application min spec is. It didn't include the OS, things like that. These are kind of common problems that you would see if somebody's never done infrastructure or architecture before, right? So that assessment should paint all those things out. Next thing, you make your priority. Third is to strategize what comes first, and then start execution. And execution can take time, and it depends on how big your team is. So you start on the leadership side. How many people help me get this done, and how much time do I have to get it done in? And so you scope it out from there and just make a battle plan.
Yeah, so you've stabilized, 30 plus year old platforms before. So what was the biggest mistake you made or people make when they inherit legacy systems and try to modernize it too fast?
So there's a couple things. It depends on the application, because I've worked in a few application development platforms before, including back in my before times. I worked at EA Games, for example, and they had a thing called a budget. And by budget does not mean fiscal budget, does not mean this amount of dollars spent to make X thing. Budget to them was a hardware budget. You cannot go above this amount of RAM or this amount of CPU. You cannot max this out. You have this much disk space to work with, and that's it, right? And they would code and design their application around the constraints given to them by an architecture. In this case, the reason why they did that at EA was at the time, platforms were getting huge. So your budget was to the min spec of an Xbox, or your min spec of a PlayStation. So those hardware you can't upgrade. You're not going to be changing those anytime soon. So your application needs to run within the scope and specs of that infrastructure. I think the same thing too should happen with applications in general when they develop. Otherwise, they build things that are just ridiculously big. You see this on modern apps today, where they take up like the installs like 500 gig, and you're like, well, they have a terabyte. It's fine. Who cares? It's like, yeah, it's not your machine, and they have other stuff on there besides you. So the chances of you getting uninstalled because they used it twice are going up exponentially every time you do something like that. So that kind of practice, I think, needs to be back in the world of the developer side. It's one thing I've noticed that I think would be beneficial, that's right out of a different industry.
That's interesting. Now you've achieved like 85% faster DevOps pipelines with 40% faster build cycles with AI integrations. So, in a maritime technology environment where uptime isn't optional, how do you move fast without introducing unacceptable risks?
So the challenge there, it's mostly on the build side. So this is mostly, it's not the SaaS based applications don't have this problem as much as a ThickNet client does. But the approach is essentially, um, you have some optimization to do, and then back to your previous question, what can I do to modernize that process to make it more efficient while not changing any of the fundamental architecture of the application itself. So, for example, one of the things you could try doing won't necessarily mean it'll go work, but you could try containerizing the application. It's a 30-year-old app, right?
Yeah.
I have containerized ancient applications. I will call them ancient. Um,
Mm.
Before it is perfectly possible to do. I've containerized multiple applications and made a full automated software deployment package for call centers before, where they have to have 6 or 7 specific applications, their scripting, their call IVR tools, and a couple other things, right? And same Windows OS, drivers had to be the same, all that kind of fun stuff. So I made a complete deployment package, including containerizing the application and containerizing the OS level as well to an install package that took less than 20 minutes when the average single build would take you 4 to 6 hours. So it's not my first rodeo to do something like that. It's just you got to think around the box. The things you can't change, don't try changing them. The things you can change, what can you do there, and what kind of what would be the expected outcome versus the actual outcome? You don't know until you try, right? So try making a build that containerizes the app on an older application. And if that works, then man, you can do a ton after that. You can deploy anywhere.
Yep, absolutely. So you're wearing both hats, this IT and CISO hats, right?
Yep.
So that's a combination that some always struggle with. Different priorities, different tolerances. So how do you reconcile those two functions into one role?
So I I honestly don't think that cybersecurity ever should have split from infrastructure. One of those people that I'm for not necessarily having the CISO as a board member or talking directly to the board for risk and cyber governance. I understand the need when you get big enough that there should be a role like that, but not necessarily at C-suite. And the reason why I say that is you should be doing from get-go secure by design. That is something that's been talked about a lot. You're not going to get there if your CIO and your CISO are two different people arguing about what should be done or can be done. If they're the same people and your both objectives are the same, then it's easier. And in a smaller context, like smaller companies, easy. If I own both spaces, I can do secure by design because not only am I following the standards and practices of a CISO would do, I'm implementing what I practice, what I preach. I'm implementing what I intend to do as the cybersecurity side. So the vulnerability management, all that fun stuff, right? And
Yeah.
the challenge therein for a software dev company, for example, is to get the other teams to come along with you. So now the challenge is getting developers to do secure code by design and things like that. That takes a little bit more work, and that's where the CISO hat kind of comes on more. But on the infrastructure side, I have a lot of leverage and controls where it doesn't go in my environment unless it passes this particular risk assessment or audit or whatever. So it depends on the organization, but personally, I think the CIO should be aligned 100% with cybersecurity at all times. It's just the way it should be.
Absolutely. So was there ever a decision where you had to override your IT instincts because of a security concern or vice versa?
No, I can't think of one actually. Like, I wouldn't override a cybersecurity concern unless there was a legitimate business case, in which case that's a business decision, not necessarily a me decision, right? So if, for example, if for some reason your company wanted to do additional business in countries that are known to steal things, like communist countries. I'm not
Mm.
pointing too many fingers, but they are known to appropriate whatever the hell gets deployed into their environment, and that's the end of it, right? Um, they did that with NVIDIA not too long ago and made Seek. But that kind of thing is a business decision. Now, whether or not I get a seat at the table to say this is a really bad decision or not is where I think the one hat comes on. The CIO, head of IT, that kind of role should have that say, and those guys should be listening to cybersecurity, saying, you deploy here, you might as well, what's the value of your company? You might as well just give that to the government that you're about to deploy in, because they will take it and they will re-architect it, and then they'll sell it themselves at a fraction of the cost, because they're just going to use your code with a couple tweaks.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't stop them, because good luck stopping a country from stealing your product. They do it all the time. I think it was Mark Cuban that said the same thing. Like, China's known for stealing products. Why would you do business with them, right? And it's the same on the software side. There's the reason why, even though Azure has a footprint in China, no one is able to deploy there out of the commercial side. You have to actually get a special China license just to deploy there.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about your culture and people, and you as being a leader. You said you've cared as much about people and culture as platforms and controls, right? So that sounds good on paper, but what does that actually look like when you're under pressure to deliver the team and the team is stretched out?
Oh, in my line of work, the team is already stretched out, because there's so much more to do than there are people, and the first heads to get cut are usually the IT side. There is a tendency to get some bloatedness in there as well. Having been laid off myself, I can recognize those situations where you hired one too many admins for no apparent reason, just to get a bunch of work done in a single year. But then you didn't plan for multi-year. It's just poor planning at that point. I would say, though, culturally, the way I look at things in this space is you get a top-notch team, and then you level set expectations. The reason why I adopt agile best practices in my teams is to say that every person is able to do a specific amount of route. They have a capacity to which, I'm not asking them to move more than 40 hours, and I never would. But in that scale, we're just going to, instead of doing everything in the next 3 months because we've got a deadline, well, we're going to plan 6 months ahead to deliver that deadline in the time that they want it, but have all this extra room to get everything else done they need to get done before it happens. So we just shift priorities. It's not terribly bad. You just got to plan with the capacity. So it's a little bit of more of a project management approach than a normal leadership approach. I'm not demanding things get done yesterday. I'm trying to get a deadline together from product or from whoever before they need to deliver. So I'm at least 3 months ahead and ready to go by the time they're right. Like, we need these things now. It's like, oh, you already got it. You're good. Have a nice day.
Okay. So you've built and led teams of like 40 plus people across global operations. So what's that one leadership mistake you've made early on that you never repeat?
There's been a couple times where I was in a situation where I trusted somebody, and I trusted them emphatically, and ended up being they were blowing smoke and completely lying to my face. And there's been a couple situations where I was not compelled, but let's say put in a situation where doing a white lie was probably a good idea at the time. It ended up not being, let's say. Each of those times, it came down to a core thing that I learned early on. This is like 20 plus years ago, I think, about now. But it's integrity is absolute key in both, especially in cybersecurity, but in IT in general. People are trusting you with their data. People are trusting you with their identity. We are the ones giving out the keys to allow people to even work, right? Your passwords don't exist unless we create them. So that integrity is ubermensch important. And if you don't have that, you're going to be fail. So in some of my leadership positions, I've had some people that have directly lied to my face. You ask anybody that I work with, and they'll probably say that I'm kind of quirky and a little bit funny because of the way I handle things. Like, somebody asks me, how are you doing today? I'm like, well, I'm miserable. How about you? I'm not going to lie, because maybe I just went to the dentist this morning, or I woke up and my shoulder was out of socket and that sucked, and I sprained my ankle. So yeah, I'm having a miserable day. How about you? I'm not going to say I'm fine, thanks. How are you? clearly I'm not fine. I got a sprained ankle and a bad shoulder. That's not fine, right? So I will make for awkward conversations if somebody asks, they're looking for platitudes, simple answers, and it's always a white lie, but that's a slippery slope to me. So I refuse to lie. And if at all possible, I will say I don't know or I can't tell you, especially when it comes to things you're like, if we're doing mass layoffs or doing something like that in a leadership position, you really can't tell anyone because you're also trying to prevent bad people or good people from doing bad things, right? They're normally good, but somebody in a fit of rage can do very stupid things sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a little bit of that, but I don't lie then either. I just can't. I say I can't say. I don't. I can't talk about it, and that's the end of it. But I'm not lying either because I really can't talk about it because if I did, it's a compromise, right? So
Right.
it's that lesson over 30 years of my life has been one that has stuck true for as long as possible. It makes for weird conversations, but at the same time,
I bet.
it's a matter of my core principles. I refuse to lie if I can help it.
Bravo to that for sure. So for other leaders that are walking into messy environments, right? Legacy systems, fragmented teams, no governance. What's that one principle or practice you tell them to implement first?
You need to do an assessment, figure out where the holes are at. It could be process, it could be people, it could be infrastructure. It doesn't matter. You need to figure out why is this a hot mess in the first place? Was it bad leadership? Was it crappy policies? Was it good team but bad apple in the team? That's also possible, and it happens every once in a while. Um, there was a pretty good book that I read. I think it was the Five Principles of Leadership, something like that. And it was like a narrative where this lady was stepping into a CEO, and the whole team was dysfunctional on the leadership side. There's one person in particular that stood out that they all were they were on a weekend or a week retreat with leadership, and they were given a project to do. And one lady just came back in and said, "Oh, I've already done it. Like I just did it. It's." And everybody else is like, "Well, we got no input in the thing you just put together." And like, "Oh no, it's fine. I got it done. I always do them." Like that is an anti-pattern for that's a person that either wants to be, they're narcissistic, so they want to be seen. They want to be the person that's up front, and they're clearly not content and happy and just feel like this was dumb and I could have just done this all myself. It's like, all right, well, you can go do this all yourself by yourself. In the book, actually, she gets fired. So
Hmm.
um, there's it depends on the patterns. It helps that the reason why my doctorates in organizational leadership kind of focuses on psychology because I study people too. So you can
Right.
see the anti patterns. Leaders can see them as well. You just got to pay attention and know your people. Once you get a good sense of who's blowing smoke and who's telling you the truth, and see the infrastructure for what it is, and just watch behaviors, you know what needs to be fixed, and now you need to prioritize.
Nice, nice. So is there something you're building right now or exploring that you're excited about?
Yeah, there's a couple inside projects I'm not going to discuss because I want to give those away because they're fun. But one I'm really having fun with is AI initiatives in particular. Agentic AI looks the most popular and actually I think the most applicable to business in general because you take normal processes, put an AI on top of it, and then you can do AI enablement across the business, and it's pretty much automated at that point, but even faster. See, now you get first responder remediation quicker than waiting for somebody's eyes on glass to see it, right? Um, Also, I'm dabbling in some vibe coding just because I keep seeing the memes out there about the dude with his computer that's vibe coding versus an actual developer in a laptop just in a quiet dark room.
Yeah.
I wanted to give it a go, so I installed Claude on my local machine and have been trying to have it code Unreal Engine just for fun.
Nice. Good deal. Good deal. Yeah, it's with AI, can you give us obviously you got projects you're working on, but overall the introduction of AI into say cybersecurity, um, it sounds like you see more of an enablement, right? Can you give us some cons though, as far as obviously hallucinations and going outside the guardrails, right? But in your experience, have you seen any other things that we should be worried about?
There is a couple things that everyone should be worried about, and it actually is part of human error. Is the reason why they exist in the first place.
Mm,
Your DLP, your data loss prevention, and your data classification. If you do not have that, you are garbage in, garbage out, 100%. Your AI will have a conniption fit and start doing things it probably shouldn't, especially coupled with identity and access management. If
mm,
you give the AI God access and then ask it to do something that you shouldn't be able to do, well, it's going to do it. There was a good example of that with Copilot about a month ago now, maybe two, where some dude asked it to go to the CFO's personal files, find next year's quarterly earnings before it's been announced, copy that and download it to my personal OneDrive, and then clean the logs because I don't want any evidence of that happening. And sure as crap, Copilot did it. Why? Because it had admin root access to literally everything, so it could do it. So the guardrails that don't exist currently that people are quickly learning about, I'm seeing more posts on it, so I'm happy about that. But
mm,
identity needs to be the key of AI protection, meaning that any prompt that I give an AI, it should only be able to execute based on my permissions, not based on its own. Because if it's its own, it could do everything. And the second thing is it clean your data up. Like you've had years to do it. I know it's now a swamp mess in some locations, but the reason why AI is going to have a conniption fit and just do weird things and not being able to do anything cohesive for a business is because your data was never cleaned up in the first place. So your DLP is number two. I will go access first.
wow. Good advice, Glenn, for sure. Good advice. So that Glenn, thanks for being here. This was a real conversation about what it takes to rebuild not just systems but organizations. So to everyone listening, if this episode helped you think differently about governance, stabilization, or leading from complexity, share it with someone who's in the trenches. Thanks for joining us on Automated Die Trying, where the future is being built in real time.